Yeah. Okay. So I'm just going to give you some ideas, that will help you prepare for the test. But before that, I had a comment about your third assignment. I mean, you have been uploading your assignment without your name and USN number, I mean, your student ID. I mean, it's becoming extremely difficult for the PS to track your homework, right, and get those to me because I'm the one who will eventually grade and then enter the grade. Okay, so please, re-upload, and on top of every page, you should write your name and student ID. Okay, all right. Okay, so now I think we will just go to first we go to this the book because as I said, the content um, of the course, I mean for the test is okay. So what you should do is first let me write the content of the test. I mean even though I made a post of this anyway in the classroom, but the content is chapters 5 and 6 from Maxler, and this is there in the classroom folder, right? The book is uploaded. You already know that. And plus regression, okay? Whatever you need to know from about regression is in the whiteboard, right? In the whiteboard folder, basically my notes that we worked out in class, plus Rajjan's slides. And this is also in the same whiteboard folder. Okay, all right. And I mean, let me just like, I'm just trying to type in. Yeah, this is the book. So if you go to this book, I'll just, why don't I do this while I talk to you? Is, go to the classwork folder. In the whiteboard itself, I'll upload this. Okay, so I'm uploading this to the whiteboard folder so that you have access to the book. And what I'm going to tell you now is that, yes. So, so chapter 14, so let me write here also. So this includes chapter 14 from Jan's book. and also I think 15.1 pretty much. Okay, so um, 15.1. Okay, so let me now go to chapter 14, the exercise. So, okay, so let's just manually scroll down. And, yeah, oh, this book does not have the exercise. Okay, okay, fine, no problem. I mean, just, I mean, whatever exercises are there, you can just pretty much look at the examples that are worked out in chapter 14, right? Which are actually the same examples that we worked out in class as well. Okay, all right. Um, so whatever information you need to read this. Uh, you know, get yourself familiarized with all the formulas. I mean, even though it's going to be an open book exam, right? Um, Pretty much, I would like you to know all the formulas, at least, I mean, in the sense, know in the sense, at least you're familiar with all the formulas and what those formulas are doing, right? Okay. Um, okay. So once again, I thought of asking, computational questions, but I mean, maybe probably it's going to be more conceptual than anything else. So in particular, I mean, you need to understand, in particular, what you need to understand are, you know, the error, right? The error, the residuals, pretty much, right? Um, and the R square, right? Um, right. So all of these, I mean, essential concepts, right? Uh, Interpretation of coefficients. Like for example, if I ask you the following, that if your regression model, I mean, let me ask you this question: if your regression model has only the intercept term, right? I mean, if your what can you say? Your regression model just has the intercept term, nothing else. I mean, it does not have the predictor variable. So what can you say about the R square value? So, I mean, such type of questions. Okay, all right. Um, so let me show you some samples there. Uh, so anyway, the samples are I mean, whatever I have worked out in class. So, I mean, please try to answer my question. If you have just the coefficient, the intercept term in the regression model, which is your regression model is just y is equal to b naught or beta naught, right? What would be, I mean, your R square value? What do you think? Anyone? No? Do you think the R square value will be even significant? My question is if your regression model, if your regression model has only the intercept term. So what is your regression model? Your regression model is generally your regression model, linear regression model is beta naught x plus beta naught plus beta 1x plus epsilon, right? Which is like this. Normally distributed with mean 0 and standard deviation. Now, if your beta 1 is 0, then your regression model is just this, right? I mean, there is no question of error because I think the error will also be uniform because you have just the intercept, and there could be whatever error that is. I mean, the errors will no longer be normally distributed, so you have just the intercept. So what do you think will happen to your R square? I mean, what is it? What is y is equal to beta naught? It's just a line, right? Uh, it's just a line. I mean, it's not. I mean, okay. Forget about R square. What do you think about the model itself?
The model will fit to the average of all the data.
Mm,
Just because it's just a constant line, so the best it can do will be the mean
okay. I mean, it's just a line parallel to the what? Which axis?
by x-axis.
Right. So it's a line parallel to the x-axis, and no matter, I mean, however your data is scattered, right? I mean, your model is not going to change. I mean, you can only push the model up or down, right? So
Yes.
you cannot adjust the model according to the variance in your data if you chose a really bad model, right? So what will happen to your R square then? I mean, what is R square? R square is a coefficient or a value that explains the variability in your model due to regression, right? I mean, here what you are doing, you are not even regressing. I mean, you're just, I mean, you are setting your bias. I mean, if you change the value beta naught to raise it up or bring it down, you are just changing your bias. You are not accounting for the variance in the model at all, right? So, what sort of R square value would you expect?
Sir, won't the SSE and SST be the same?
Okay, and that means
Its R square will be 0.
right because R square is 1 minus SST over SST, right? You have seen
Yeah.
that from the slides before, and so the R square value will be 0. say, or even close to 0 or something like that. Okay, all right. So these are the sort of conceptual questions that I would sort of would like to ask. Okay, from the regression model. Okay, there's one problem with Google Form is that I would have liked to upload some scatter plots and then ask questions from like some sort of visual questions, but that is not possible in Google Form. But I will do that in the Compre. So having said that, so next, just focus on this, right? And I'm just trying to make this slightly comfortable for you. Is that because chapter 5 is something that you are already tested upon, but since eigenvalues are really really important, right? I would like to just sort of go back and uh, point you out to certain problems that you should actually you know take a look at. Is that in chapter 5 exercises, so in the chapter 5 exercises, um, so number 5, I think. Yes. And number 4, okay, and then 10, 11, 12, 14. Okay, so 10, 11, 12, 14, 10, 11, 12, 14. Okay, let me see if there is something else that I can. Um, 21 and 23. Okay, 21 and 20. All right, chapter 6. Chapter 6, some problems are notoriously long, so you can just simply skip those problems. I'll point you out. But also please, refresh thoroughly the least square optimization concepts and Gram-Schmidt orthonormalization concepts, because those are really, really important, right? So that you create an orthonormal basis, right? So I think this is number 2 that we have solved actually. So um, so 2, 3, 4. Let us say 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4, and yeah, this particular problem number 7 is a notoriously long problem, so don't even attempt that. Yeah, so 9, 10, 11. Okay, so 9, 10, 11. So let me just take a look at number 9. So number 9 is n is a positive integer. Suppose n is a positive integer and there is a basis that is given to you, right? So read the problem carefully, right? So there is a basis that is given to you, show that this is an orthonormal list of vectors in a particular interval. Okay, all right, and the inner product is defined. So, I mean, basically what you have to do is to compute this integral, right? Okay, between minus pi to plus pi. So, what you can do is, the first thing that you need to show is that, these are your functions. So 1 over square root of 2 pi, I mean, these are your basis functions, sine x over square root of pi, sine of 2x over square root of pi, okay, and then cosine of x over square root of pi, cosine of 2x over square root of pi, so on and so forth. So this is your basis, right? This is the basis that is given to you, okay? And the integral that is defined, the inner product is defined on function spaces in the following manner. In fact, if you look carefully, this could be an infinite dimensional vector space as well, right? Okay. But anyway, we should still be able to compute the inner product. Okay. All right. Now, if you take any of these two functions, like f and g, right? Okay. So, and assume that your the coefficients are not the same. So in other words, I mean, if you try to integrate sine of, let's say, I'll just take one example, sine of jx over sine of jx and sine of kx. Okay, all right. Now j and k are different. So j can be 1, right, and k can be 2, right, as long as j and k are different, right? And you should be able to compute this by using some formula, right? And do you know what formula to use here? I mean, how do we break this integral? So all you have to do is each element, you have to show that each element has norm 1. So the first one is easy because this is just 1 over square root of pi 1 dx, right? So if you integrate this and take the norm, you will find that this one has norm 1. Okay, so that's not a problem. So you have to show that each one of those has norm 1, and each one of those, I mean, if you take any two non-equal elements, which is sine x by square root of pi and sine of 2x by square root of pi, and you integrate it this way, basically computing the inner product, that inner product should be 0. Okay, because that's the definition of orthogonality, right? That if you take the inner product of I and j, where I and j are not equal to each other, then that inner product is 0. If they're equal to each other, then the inner product should give you 1, right? So if you take an integral of sine x over square root of pi with sine x over square root of pi, then what you are going to get is, like, for example, inner product of f and f pretty much. Because here we are taking inner product of functions, not inner product of vectors, right? So this is nothing but square root of integral of minus pi to pi. So sine of x, which is sine square of x, divided by pi dx, right? Okay, so you can pull this pi out, okay? So this could be 1 over pi, and then you have to deal with this integral sine square of dx. How are we going to deal with this integral sine square of dx? I mean, sine square of x?
Convert to cos 2x term.
Correct, right? So we have some inequalities, right? I mean, triangle identities. I think maybe cosine of 2x is 1 minus 2 sine square x, and sine of 2x is 2 sine x cosine of x. Also, whenever there is a cosine function, you need to write this in terms of cosines as well. So I think that is 2 cosine square of x minus 1, right? So you got to use these identities. So you can replace this sine square x as 1 minus cosine of 2x divided by 2. integrate it between minus pi and pi, divide this by pi, and you will see that this will go to 0. Okay, so similarly you can check this. So you don't really have to check it for all of these identical terms. So if one of these is 0, similarly, when you have cosine of x over square root of pi and cosine of x over square root of pi, which means when you have the inner product of g with itself, right? Okay, then you will have minus pi to pi 1 over pi cosine square of x, right? Dx. And there what you are going to do is to replace the cosine square with the corresponding, multiple angle or the double angle, right? And integrate, and you will see that this will go to 0. Okay, so you will see that these identical inner products will go to sorry, this will not be 0, this will be 1, right? This will also be 1, right? So what you got to show is that if I take any two different terms, then and if I take this and pull this 1 over pi out, so this guy will be 0. Now, how do I deal with this? Because these are both signs, right? So there are some formulas which convert the product to sum, right? I don't exactly remember what this is. I think this is this should be sine of a plus b. No, this should be cosine of a plus b plus cosine of a minus b, something like that, right? Okay, and then you convert this to cosine and then you integrate it, you are going to get 0. So that way you show that these kind of functions are, basis functions are orthonormal and they form an orthonormal basis. Okay. Similarly, let's say problem number 10 is, if I take a look at problem number 10, it says on a set of polynomials of degree 2 over real, we consider an inner product given by this. Okay, all right. So this means the polynomials are of the form 1 plus x squared. So you apply the Gram-Schmidt procedure to the basis. If you recall, I have shown you a Gram-Schmidt, how to work out a Gram-Schmidt, right? So these are your basis functions. So as it is, you can see that these are not orthonormal, right? I mean, except the first one, the other two do not have norm of norm is equal to 1. So you have to first make these orthonormal. Okay, so what you can, because as it is, if you take 1 and x here and just plug those in, then this will not be 0. You can easily see that, right? So you have to do a projection of x in the direction of 1 and you find out that vector, right? And then normalize that vector and then replace that vector as a function x with that, right? And then extend it to the third one. So you know that Gram-Schmidt algorithm, right? And if you do it, you will find some specific polynomial. Okay, I'm going to tell you the answer. So for you to verify. So this is problem number 10. Let me. Let's see. So for the Gram-Schmidt, you start, this is your basis. You got to orthonormalize this. Okay, and the orthonormalization procedure is governed by this inner product, right? Okay, which is between 0 and 1. Okay, all right. And so if you do this correctly, you will get 1 square root of 3 times minus 1 plus 2x and square root of 5 times 1 minus 6x plus. And if you check this, I mean, take any of these two, right, and use this inner product definition, you will see that those inner products will be 0. Okay. Okay. Now the next, this is important. So problem number 11. What happens if the Gram-Schmidt procedure is applied to a list of vectors that is not linearly independent? So we are applying Gram-Schmidt to a list of vectors that are not linearly independent. What will happen? What do you think? So I'll just start with taking a set of vectors, right? Okay, and according to my assumption, these are linearly dependent set of vectors, right? Okay. So which means what? Which means that I have a combination of scalars, right? I equal to 1 to n, such that I have summation aivi equal to 0, and some ai is actually could be non, right? That's what this means. Now, first of all, there has to be some, calibrated reasoning to this. Like, you can assume, like, let's say if V1 equal to 0, right? Then you can't even apply Gram-Schmidt, because if V1 is equal to 0, your norm is undefined, right? Because your normalization process involves that you divide V1, the vector V1 by its norm. So this is itself undefined, right? Okay, this is itself undefined. And so therefore, what you can do is the following, is that, you should not consider this as an option. So the next stage, if V1 is not 0, then what? Then we know by the same lemma, the lemma that I have, right? By the same lemma, there is some Vj in the span. So there is some Vj, in the span of the remaining vectors, right? Right? Okay. So you can choose j to be the smallest positive integer with this property, and if you apply the Gram-Schmidt procedure, right, to what are your goal? Your goal is to produce the equivalent vectors which will be normalized, like typically produce an E1, E2, all the way up to EJ plus 4, right? So this is what I want to produce. I want to produce an orthonormal list, an orthonormal basis, which is, let's say, E1 to EJ minus 1, right? Okay, such that the span of V1 to Vj minus 1 is nothing but the span of V1 to Vj minus 1. This is Gram-Schmidt, right? Okay. Now, we have a result which says this. We have a result actually. Let me start this out. There is a lemma in chapter 6, okay, which says that I can express Vj as the inner product of Vj E1 minus E1, right, all the way up to Vj Ej minus 1, Ej minus 1. Okay, all right, and then I'll produce Vj, right? Okay. So what happens if I use this? So this is the Gram-Schmidt formula, right? Okay. So from this lemma, what can I argue? So let's go to the book, right? And let's go to the Gram-Schmidt. This is the Gram-Schmidt, right? So if you look at the Gram-Schmidt, right, in this one, we ensure that the Vj, I mean the Vj vector, is not in the span of V1 through Vj minus 1, right? Because the set is linearly independent. And so therefore, Vj is also not in the span of, E1 through Ej minus 1, right? And therefore, we are not dividing by 0 in the equation above. So the Ej is well defined, okay? All right. And but what we are doing here, we are exactly doing the opposite, right? So this is the Gram-Schmidt formula. This is how you are going to produce an orthonormal set of vectors, right? Okay. So clearly, what we are doing here, we are actually dividing, to produce a Vj, we are actually dividing it, by a vector 0 of length 0, right? And so therefore, I mean, such a thing is not allowed, and therefore you cannot apply Gram-Schmidt to a list of vectors which are not linearly independent. Okay. So, all right. So let me go down. So by the way, don't worry about adjoint operators in chapter 6. That will not be part of the test. Okay. Because we haven't covered it. Let me see if there are other nice examples. Well, don't worry much about this. So, okay, problem 14 is kind of interesting. So, find an orthonormal basis of, once again, the vector space of polynomials of degree 2 with the inner product as defined in exercise 10, which is nothing but the integral, such that the differentiation operator has an upper triangular matrix with respect to the basis. Okay. So you have to find an orthonormal basis such that the differentiation operator, okay, on the same vector space has an upper triangular matrix with respect to the basis. Okay. Now, so let's set up this problem. So my operator is, so the operator is derivative operator, right? So you have a polynomial p of x, right, which belongs to the set of polynomials of degree 2, and you have defined an operator. Your operator is nothing but p prime of x. So your basis, we know what the basis is in such a space, right? Your basis are 1, x and x square. So if you apply the operator that we defined, so it will take 1 to 0, x to 1 and x squared to 2x, right? Okay, right? Uh, but if you look at 1x x squared as a basis, it's not an orthonormal basis. But I mean, if you apply the Gram-Schmidt, right? If you apply the Gram-Schmidt, you are going to get an orthonormal basis, right? With respect to which the differential operator has an upper triangular matrix, right? Okay. So that's about it. I mean, so you'll get 0, 1, and 2. The upper triangular matrix is trivial, right? I mean, that follows clearly. But I mean, the elements of the upper triangular matrices can be read off from the polynomial itself, which I showed in the previous example. So, okay, yeah. So this is another example. This is, I think, problem number 15. Yes, I think it's problem number 15. This is 15 from Axelis book. It says that suppose U is a subspace of V, then can you show that dimension of the orthogonal complement of U is dimension of V minus dimension of V. Okay, all right. Now we know that we have already discussed this several times, that if you construct subspaces which are orthogonal to each other, then you can decompose the vector space as a direct sum of the one subspace and its orthogonal complement. Okay, all right. We also know, so these are known to us, that dimension of V is nothing but dimension of U plus dimension of its orthogonal complement, right? Okay. And from there, it follows straightforward. You know, whatever you are supposed to show follows straightforward. Right? Okay, I think, I mean, that's about it. So you can, so this test is on 10 marks, right? So once again, so that means I'll have 5 questions. I'll have 5 questions. I think 2 will be from, out of these 5 questions, 2 will be from least square optimization. Regression, there will be 2 questions from chapter 6 and 1 from chapter 5. Okay, all right. That's about it. Once again, your comprehensive exam is going to be, you know, subjective type, descriptive type, which means you have got to prove results, right? Not theorems, because theorems are already in the book. You got to prove some results in your comprehensive, but as far as this test is concerned, you should be okay as long as you understand the concept. Okay, all right. So that's it for today. So we'll see. And when you write your test, please make sure that your videos are turned on. Okay. All right. Okay. Good luck.